Hey all, here are OS reviews. Recently we checked out the Edifier W320TNs, which were a pretty solid pair of wireless buds that, despite having an open shape similar to Apple AirPods, actually have active noise cancellation and also support high-res audio via LDAC audio codec. But today we're taking a look at Edifier's true flagship buds for the year. These are their NeoBuds Pro 2s, and by contrast adds a sprinkle of even more features, including spatial audio via head tracking, and have a more conventional seal using silicon tips. So the ANC effectiveness should supposedly be even better on these, although similarities include high-res audio certification via LDAC, which is a codec that can provide up to 3 times more details if you are using an Android smartphone, and also having Android fast pair as well. Battery life is even very similar at 22 hours combined with the battery case, which is around average, I'd say, though you get up to 4 hours of continuous music listening if you have ANC turned on, around 5.5 hours with it turned off before you have to pop them into the case to get a quick top-up, though it does have quick charging, so just 15 minutes in the case will provide up to 2 hours of additional listening time. Now, other functions on here include also having support for LHDC. This is still a high-res codec, however it has better latency compared to LDAC. So if you are watching back a video clip, there's going to be less lag between the video and the audio source. Kind of an interesting choice there. Still retains the wearing detection sensor to automatically play and pause the music depending on if you have them popped in or out. And they also are splash resistant, just like before IP54. So if you're wearing them outdoors, if there's a bit of rain, or if you're sweating, it should still survive. But perhaps more importantly, these are dual driver buds. They have a balanced armature driver from Knowles plus a 10mm dynamic driver. So the concept of having multiple drivers, aka speakers inside, is they can be responsible for different ends of the frequency spectrum. For example, one is dedicated more for bass versus another one is more oriented for trebles and mids, typically resulting in more nuanced sound compared to a single driver pair of buds. Accessories include a plethora of silicon tips. Typically we only see small, medium, and large on most buds, but this gets you even more granularity if you want to find something in between. And you also find a USB Type-C charging cable. Now perhaps the only function that is missing on these would be wireless Qi charging support. That would have been nice to find, but every other sensor and functionality underneath the sun is essentially packed into these flagship buds. Otherwise, we have a quick carrying pouch as well to protect it when on the road, and just a quick user guide. Taking a closer look at the design of the battery case, it's constructed out of a matte polycarbonate plastic that feels very well put together. There's the Edifier logo accented onto the hinge and top, USB Type-C for charging, and that is more or less it. Now there's also an LED accent light on the side, which can be changed to 8 different colors, and you can customize the accent color using the companion app. So again, showing a lot of attention to detail that we don't typically see. By default, it starts off in this neutral white color. They have kind of an interesting angular shape, which is retained from the previous generation NeoBuds Pros. It's quite distinctive, although on the black version here, it's a bit more powdered and super stealth-like. I have to admit, I am a fan of the overall design and aesthetic here. There's multiple microphones on the sides. Now, as far as the mesh here for the drivers, it is made out of fabric, but has a fairly clean design. And despite being a dual driver pair of buds, again, there are 2 speakers essentially inside, it's not overly bulky either. But it's still reasonably comfortable as you're wearing it without producing too much stress or strain, I would say. When it comes to connectivity, they are super easy to pair, as suggested by the Google Fast Pair logo here on the bottom. Essentially, the moment that you open up the lid and you have Bluetooth turned on your phone, it will be recognized using a pop-up, and it will then connect onto your Google account. So if you're locked into other devices like another phone or computer in the future, it will be much easier to quickly connect to these buds without having to repair. That said, the custom application from Edifier of course brings even more control. You can check out the battery percentage remaining on the left-right side as well as the case, and on the top here you can even tap to play back some soothing nature sounds or white noises to help you relax. Then down below here, you can toggle on or off active noise cancellation, and there are 3 granularity tiers, including a high mode, there's a medium, as well as a low noise reduction. And I like the fact that you're able to adjust these, although one difference compared to the W320TNs was that those were adaptive, meaning that depending on your environment, it would automatically crank it up higher or lower. So you can't adjust it yourself. It's kind of the opposite on these, where I kind of think it would have been nice to also have the adaptive function, maybe as a 4th profile. ANC is indeed super effective on the NeoBuds Pro 2s. provides even better noise isolation even without it being turned on. So I would say it's about 5 to maybe even 10% better if you are in a similar surrounding. It just reduces even more background sounds, including engine noises, fans from a car or an airplane. It actually works quite well. You don't have to crank the volume up as much to enjoy your music. Surprisingly, I think it gets quite close to some of the industry leaders from Sony and Bose when it comes to the efficacy of the ANC as a whole, although higher frequency sounds like maybe a baby crying, higher pitched noises will still sometimes creep in by nature of this technology. The ambient sound mode does have a few additional tricks though compared to the W320TNs. There is a voice enhancement as well as a balance and a background sound mode. So what this does is it provides a digital audio transparency mode using the microphones to essentially magnify the noises around you so you can be aware of your surroundings and have a conversation without popping them out. And there's even a wind reduction mode that might come in handy, say if you're biking outdoors and trying to have a conversation. Scrolling into the next tab is really where the fun begins. You can of course toggle into a low latency gaming mode if you're watching movies, trying to reduce the lag between the video and the audio. More excitingly, you get the spatial audio mode. And this is the first time I've seen a manufacturer use a 3D model to showcase how your head is moving and tilting in space. It's actually really cool. So there are accelerometers, aka motion sensors, built on both the left and right side of the buds that know how much you're lifting your head upwards, downwards, left, and right. So as you can tell here, as I'm moving my head around, it will showcase that in real time here using that visualization. Surprisingly accurate for something that is built directly onto these buds, and again, transmitting this data over using Bluetooth. Now, if you are changing your position or posture, you can also recalibrate the buds here just by tapping there, and it will use that as a center point. And they even provide some other visualization effects as well, including a quote-unquote dog model. It kind of reminds me of what Apple and Samsung maybe have as their animojis that you can use, and as you're rotating your head, you can see it change in real time. But again, all this data is done using the buds, transmitting their location in space over to the phone. The expressions, of course, won't really actually change. There's also a boy and kind of a girl model that you can play around with as well. What I will say though is, although this is super cool, the overall effect of the spatial audio, although it definitely makes an impact, is still a little different compared to what Apple provides on their AirPods and through Apple Music, having certain tracks that have been optimized in the recording to be compatible with spatial audio. On these, they're basically transforming any regular track, even YouTube that you're watching, into this effect. So as you're tilting your head around, it will sound like the audio is coming more prominently from the left side versus the right side, versus if you're completely centered, it's going to sound the same as it was before. If you turn all the way around, it's going to kind of sound like the music is coming from behind you. So it does make kind of a difference, although depending on the genre and the song that you're listening to, the impact might be greater, versus on some music it might not be quite as suitable for, though it does try to make it seem like you're in more of a live environment. Still, the difference again with optimized songs from, say, Apple Music with spatial audio is that on those, you get a little bit more separation between, even in the recording, let's say the cello versus the piano is coming from different directions. So I would argue that these are a touch less nuanced in that sense and a little bit more experimental, but still nonetheless kind of fun to play around with. Otherwise, we can slide along to change the EQ profile of the music. By default, it's going to be into this classic profile, but there's also a dynamic. And if you tap on the question mark here, it will give you a prompt of what they are suitable for. Dynamic is the one that is, I think, best for most genres like pop and rock. Classic is better for acoustic songs. And then there's also a customized profile on these, which we're missing on the W320TNs, that you can further tap on to change the granular sliders for different frequency ranges, boosting, for example, the bass versus the mids and trebles yourself. Although one thing that is missing would be a kind of automated way of tweaking this depending on your own hearing preferences. Sound ID and a lot of Soundcore products will typically come with a function which gives you a hearing test essentially to then create your own customized profile automatically, versus this requiring you to tweak the sliders yourself. With that being said, this is still better than nothing, of course, and again, the dynamic as well as the classic already sound quite good, to be completely honest, for the majority of tracks that didn't have too big of a problem. The final tab over allows you to change the RGB LED lights on the battery case, but here's an example of what the yellow color looks like versus more of an orange, a red, purple, blue, as well as green. So it's just small details like this that give you a lot of additional control that are nice to find, even if functionally they're not adding a ton, but it still just makes it feel like more of a polished user experience. Similar to past products from them, you can also tap on the gear icon on the top to check if there's any firmware updates, as well as customize the controls, which can correlate to, again, volume, play pause, going through the different ANC effects, so on and so forth. They're quite easy to customize, and by default, you have a double tap as well as a triple tap command. The sensitivity of essentially how hard you're tapping on can also be adjusted under more advanced settings and under codec. So you can also turn on or off LDAC as well as the LHDC codec as well. Especially when paired with higher resolution audio tracks, you'll get the most out of the listening experience, very nuanced. You can even change the sampling rate slightly higher versus lower as well. So a lot of adjustments there. And of course the wearing detection sensor, again, whether you want that to automatically play or pause the music, as well as whether you want the buds to turn off after X minutes of inactivity, can all be adjusted. A Find My Buds function can also chime an alarm so that it will ring if you've dropped it underneath the sofa to quickly locate it, for instance. Although, again, using the Android Fast Pair protocol, you can also find it under Android My Devices, and over there you can even see the location on a map using your phone's GPS to approximate it. One last remark here is that Edifier, again, does have widgets that you can optionally drag onto your homepage, and it can more easily change between some of the audio profiles that we just took a look at there from before. And then swiping down, there is another shortcut that will pop up as a notification typically that gives you very similar controls that we have here on the widget. For Edifier, at least, I have to say it's the most fully stacked in terms of software features that I've seen yet, even if, again, a customized hearing test mode is not available, and also bring back the dynamic ANC profile would be nice to see, although again, high versus low and medium are already quite customizable. When it comes to performance, I'm happy to report that the NeoBuds Pro 2s live up to high expectations. That is to say, the dual drivers, Knowles, again, balanced armature plus dynamic, are definitely adding a ton of clarity and detail. Bass is just so satisfying, giving you plenty of thump when you're listening to a drum beat, such as in a pop or EDM track, but at the same time not really being overpowering or out of control, and you still have tons of details when it comes to vocals, instrumentals as well, including harps and violins, never sound too screechy or piercing even at the higher frequencies as well, thanks to, again, that second driver that is dedicated for some of those notes. And as a result, it just sounds super pleasing, very smooth, and just sucks you into the music, for lack of a better expression, the moment that you start wearing them. Especially if you take advantage of some of the high-res codecs, it just brings even more detail that are often missed or drowned out if you're listening to less expensive buds. So compared to the W320TNs, I would say the biggest learning here would be, even though these also have a high-end chip when it comes to Bluetooth transmission, having LDAC, but drivers also make a big difference. On those, the trebles I would say is slightly weaker. By contrast, these just pack even more detail, and I would dare say are within my top 5 favorite pair of buds when it comes to audio quality alone, and that is really saying a lot considering that we have reviewed dozens and dozens of wireless buds throughout the past few years. So good job there to Edifier. Compared to the previous gen NeoBuds Pros, details are even more well articulated, although it's hard to quantify a specific number. I want to say about 10 to 15% better when it comes to a side-by-side listening test on top of what was already very well performing pairs of buds when it comes to audio. Really, it's the spatial audio functionality, head tracking, that is, I would argue, the biggest new feature per se. If you are, for example, watching a movie or listening to some type of concert recording, having that mode turn on and being able to dynamically hear the sound shift as you are moving your head around in space is pretty cool. But that is more or less it as far as our closer look at the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2s, and it still retains, again, very angular, distinctive design that catches the eye. This time around, just even more fine details, including customizable RGB lights, again, head tracking, and preserves excellent audio quality, even more HiFi codecs to play around with that decreases the latency a bit. If you are, again, watching videos or gaming, it's not going to be a problem here, and still remains a comfortable overall wearing experience. You can check out more details if you're interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.